Welcome y bienvenidos to another episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I am your host and teacher for this episode, Justine Gonzalez. We're going to hop into it like we always do. I'm very comfortable, very relaxed today in my hoodie, and I'm really excited to share part two of this communication mini series that we are currently engaging with here. So do remember, if you are listening on your preferred podcast platform, check the show notes, hit the link to our official Educator Aid YouTube page, and hit subscribe. This greatly helps us out. And you can also watch all of these episodes over there. So if that's your jam, make sure you go do that. I also want to sincerely say thank you. We are pushing over 40 countries where we have had listenership over 2023. And so excited to go into 2024. We are continuing to refine what we do here, and we can't do that without you. So thank you so much. If you haven't given us a great review or hit subscribe or follow on your favorite platforms, please be sure to do that now. Okay, let's hop into it. Again, any resources that we share specifically in these episodes, remember that you can click in the show notes and you can go directly to them. That also goes for our monthly featured voices interviews and anything that they're working on. We've had a lot of authors on in 2023. Make sure you go back and check out all of those during the winter here, and before we launch a brand new series of featured voices in 2024. Okay, so we're doing a communication mini series. And if you haven't, part one is live, and that is called You Are Amazing on 6 Different Levels. And this is part two. Part two, you're noticing probably that this is a little different title than what we have previously gone with here. And most of our titles have a question. Typically, we're asking a question and going really deep with that. But in this communication mini series, this particular episode today is called Complainers and Energy Drainers. Complainers and energy drainers. We all have them. We are also them at times to others. So I want to also make that clear when we're talking about any concept or topic here on the podcast. That's because we all are experiencing that on some level as humans, right? Whether it is the labels that have been created before we were ever even born on this earth, things like gender, race, different constructs that attempt to categorize us. We all have what's called a mirror experience whenever we're interacting with another person. And that is, this person is showing us more about the parts of ourselves that we like and love. And they might also be triggering us to notice the things that we don't like or love about ourselves, or maybe other experiences we've had in life. This doesn't mean that you just go around letting yourself be connected to just anyone. But I put this out there because I myself have struggled over the years to think, well, I don't act that way. And we get into this game as humans of comparing ourselves. Social media, I would contend, can make this worse. Just like social media can make it even better to connect us, to encourage us to be able to motivate one another in the human experience. But we also have more right in front of our faces of the comparison game. So I put that out there because there's this delicate dance, I believe, within all of us of looking at what exists and the very best that we want for ourselves, while also accepting and acknowledging that, yeah, there's some pieces about me that I'm not a huge fan of. There's things I want to work at getting better at and evolve in how I perceive those certain things about myself, right? And show grace to myself in my learning journey. So I say that delicately because it is this dance of, we have all been in these cycles of our lives of where we could very much be a victim, but then also simultaneously become a villain. And if we're not bringing to the forefront things as simple sounding as communication patterns, it can really affect us. So let's get into it. Complainers and energy drainers. Often when we have a conversation with communication, we are waiting to either see the person's body language, how they're saying what they're saying, And then we're filtering it through our own perception. Through our own perception, we're thinking back to other conversations we've had with this person, how those things have been received. If we've tried to set boundaries, have those boundaries been honored? We're filtering a message of a particular conversation through our lived experiences and also the things that maybe have hurt us. And that's what the ego does. The ego actually is there to try to protect us. But then it can also quickly turn into something where we're being so protective of ourselves, it comes off, in a different way than what we want. So ego itself is not necessarily a bad thing. What happens is when we don't check our ego and we don't understand the motivations by which maybe we're doing something. This is when we ourselves quickly turn into complainers and energy drainers. And I know that I have been guilty of this because we feel justified or we feel righteous in what we're saying or doing. And we feel that the person we're speaking with, they are wrong. And we've already decided they're wrong. They don't see the world the way I do. And that doesn't help our communication. So when we approach someone who is having difficulty maybe interpreting what we're saying or even connecting on like a talk level, if we're having a conversation, one of the biggest things that I have found that is helpful to start noticing is how people frame their sentences. I will give a quick example of this and then a charge, which is to start noticing how you speak about things. I've already done it numerous times right here on this podcast. So you could go back and listen for it as well. My base personality is called persister. And this personality energy, we all have it in us. But if you have something as what's called your base in a personality structure, got a lot of tools that go along with this, but in a very simplistic way, it's like your home base or where you call your primary home, right? Think of it as your primary address. It's your go-to. It probably feels safe. And it's typically a clear pattern of when you experience distress, how you positively meet your psychological needs. So when we figure out with some of our inventory tools, when we figure this out as far as what your base is, your go-to, what you can start to see are the patterns of your communication. This says a lot about the quality of our relationships and also our ability to see our own blind spots. What happens for me is if I get super excited about something, whether it's positive, negative, I can end up crusading. If I'm experiencing distress, this can be maybe blaming others, right? When I'm crusading, like, why didn't you do that? But what I noticed is when we speak, people often use frames like I feel, I think, I like or I don't like, I love, or they maybe don't even respond much at all and are kind of like, hmm, hmm, mm-hmm. And they're the type maybe on your teams, and maybe it's even you, who their go-to is, I'm going to need some more processing time. Sometimes we get frustrated when people can't meet us and mirror us with our preferred communication style. We all have the ability, this is the good news, we all have the ability to adapt and shift how we choose to communicate in any interaction every day and what energy we choose to show up in that communication strand. This actually is the key to helping to identify and alleviate the energy drainers and complainers in your life, including the narrative that you might have for yourself. If you're constantly thinking about, oh, this is so much work, or you find yourself in this kind of complaining inner dialogue about any given situation, this is just kind of that note to be a little observer. So in this part 2, be a little observer and start to just notice how often do you go into those patterns. That second thing, like I just kind of broke down about how we all have these preferred ways of even framing how we say something, like I feel, I think. I'll give another example. In my partnership with Thaddeus, my partner, I could ask him a question about how he feels about something, And typically his response is going to be, well, I don't really have feelings about that. He's not trying to be rude. He's not trying to diminish what I'm asking, but I know his base personality, right? The energy he's kind of most comfortable with as far as his personality structure, and it's thoughts and logic. That's the currency by which he communicates, the filter of which he sees the world often. Doesn't mean he doesn't have all the personality. Again, go back to the first one of this mini series. You're amazing on 6 different levels if you want to understand more what I'm talking about with the 6 different levels. But I'll say I started shifting to, hey, what is your thought on this? Because my go-to is often, well, I feel like, well, aren't you feeling like this? Feeling. There's a big difference between how somebody filters, even subconsciously, because most of this is very subconscious in our language. That's why I'm telling you. Until I started intentionally trying to notice, I was continuously like, this person's just trying to drain my energy. Well, why does this person always say things like this? Because they're communicating differently than you, Justine. So sometimes we think that there's a deeper issue with some things and it escalates to that over time, which is a whole other part of communication, conflict and conflict resolution. Drop in the comments if you want me to do something specifically on conflict for part 3. Or a part 4. I'm not sure how many I'm going to put into this series, but start to notice how you speak, start to notice how you ask questions, and start to notice how others then respond back and how that dance happens between the two of you. So that would be my charge when we start to really think about the energy drainers and complainers in our lives, including ourselves, because we can all go into these patterns. We are not immune from this, no matter how much inner work we do. This is something that we want to be aware of, we want to notice, and we want to optimize the interactions and communication that we have with others. This helps really enhance relationships. And furthermore, it helps develop respect and a mutual reciprocation in any communication exchange that we have. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on energy drainers and complainers. But the ownness of any situation is also reflecting on, were there things or that I could have said differently? Were there ways of acting I could have acted differently in that situation? And, we all have these circumstances where, again, no matter how much we attempt to regulate ourselves, sometimes we just get upset. Sometimes we go back to little 8-year-old version of ourselves and we find ourselves pouting. We find ourselves kicking and screaming in our own adult ways, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, no judgment. And you are worthy of continuing to figure yourself out. So treat your journey as a devotion to yourself. And that will not only enhance the love you have for yourself, how you view yourself, it will exude into the relationships you have with others. So let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.